YouTube, welcome back to my channel and welcome to our very first read along for our book club selection this month, Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I'm not sure why this is on here. In January we launched a 2017 book club, which was to read just a lot of books. The focus was on reading more books, not necessarily specific books, but as the months have gone by, people have asked me to recommend books and for us to read a book together. And so this is the first book that we chose. So if you're new to the book club, this is the book that we're reading this month. And even though my original suggestion was for us to read different sections of the book, I'd portion it off into 4 sections. So we'd read about 75 pages the first week. Last week we were supposed to have our first check-in and I had just a really strange day. A lot of things that I had planned, they took way longer than I had anticipated. I went to an event and I just was I was so late in coming home that it just wasn't possible for me to do it on Sunday. And so we decided to push it to today, which again falls on Easter Sunday, as well as there were a few people who told me that they just weren't able to get the book in time to do the reading. So I decided that today we would just have a read along. So my first video is going to be a read along for Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And so if you don't have the book and you feel like watching me read, Maya Angelou wrote 7 autobiographies, and this is the first of 7. So this chronicles her early life, and the acknowledgements are in the front. She says, "I thank my mother, Vivian Baxter, and my brother, Bailey Johnson, who encouraged me to remember. Thanks to the Harlem Writers Guild for concern, and to John O. Killens, who told me I could write. To Nana Kobina Nketsia I, who insisted that I must. Lasting gratitude to Gerard Purcell, who believed concretely, and to Tony Diamato, who understood. Thanks to Abby Lincoln Roach for naming my book. A final thanks to my editor at Random House, Robert Loomis, who gently prodded me back into the lost years." Page 3 is where it starts. "What are you looking at me for? I didn't come to stay." I hadn't so much forgot as I couldn't bring myself to remember. Other things were more important. "What are you looking at me for? I didn't come to stay." Whether I could remember the rest of the poem or not was immaterial. The truth of the statement was like a wadded up handkerchief sopping wet in my fists, and the sooner they accepted it, the quicker I could let my hands open and the air would cool my palms. "What are you looking at me for?" The children's section of the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church was wiggling and giggling over my well-known forgetfulness. The dress I wore was lavender taffeta, and each time I breathed, it rustled. And now that I was sucking in air to breathe out shade, it sounded like crepe paper on the back of hearses. As I'd watched Mama put ruffles on the hem and cute little tucks around the waist, I knew that once I put it on, I'd look like a movie star. It was silk, and that made up for the awful color. I was going to look like one of the sweet little white girls who were everybody's dream of what was right with the world. Hanging softly over the black Singer sewing machine, it looked like magic. And when people saw me wearing it, they were going to run up to me and say, "Marguerite." Sometimes it was, "Dear Marguerite, forgive us please, we didn't know who you were." And I would answer generously, "No, you couldn't have known. Of course I forgive you." Just thinking about it made me go around with angel's dust sprinkled over my face for days. But Easter's early morning sun had shown the dress to be a plain, ugly, cut down from a white woman's once was purple throwaway. It was old lady long too, but didn't hide my skinny legs, which had been greased with Blue Seal Vaseline and powdered with the Arkansas red clay. The age-faded color made my skin look dirty, like mud, and everyone in church was looking at my skinny legs. Wouldn't they be surprised when one day I woke out of my black, ugly dream, and my real hair, which was long and blonde, would take the place of the kinky mask that Mama wouldn't let me straighten. My light blue eyes were going to hypnotize them. After all the things they said about my daddy must have been a Chinaman, I thought they meant made out of china, like a cup, because my eyes were so small and squinty. Then they would understand why I had never picked up a southern accent or spoke the common slang, and why I had to be forced to eat pig's tails and snouts, because I was really white, and because a cruel fairy stepmother, who was understandably jealous of my beauty, had turned me into a too big Negro girl with nappy black hair, broad feet, and a space between her teeth that would hold a number 2 pencil. "Were you looking?" The minister's wife leaned toward me, her long yellow face full of sorry. She whispered, "I just come to tell you it's Easter Day." I repeated, jamming the words together. I just come to tell you it's Easter Day, as low as possible. The giggles hung in the air like melting clouds that were waiting to rain on me. I held up 2 fingers close to my chest, which meant that I had to go to the toilet, and tiptoed toward the rear of the church. Dimly, somewhere over my head, I heard ladies saying, "Lord bless the child," and "Praise God." My head was up and my eyes were open, but I didn't see anything. Halfway down the aisle, the church exploded with, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" And I tripped over a foot stuck out from the children's pew. I stumbled and started to say something, or maybe to scream, but a green persimmon, or it could have been a lemon, caught me between the legs and squeezed. I tasted the sour on my tongue and felt it in the back of my mouth. Then, before I reached the door, the sting was burning down my legs and into my Sunday socks. I tried to hold, to squeeze it back, to keep it from speeding. But when I reached the church porch, I knew I'd have to let it go, or it would probably run right back up to my head, and my poor head would burst like a dropped watermelon, and all the brains and spit and tongue and eyes would roll all over the place. So I ran down into the yard and let it go. I ran, peeing and crying, not toward the toilet out back, but to our house. I'd get a whipping for it, to be sure, and the nasty children would have something new to tease me about. I laughed anyway, partially for the sweet release. Still, the greater joy came not only from being liberated from the silly church, but from the knowledge that I wouldn't die from a busted head. If growing up is painful for the southern black girl, being aware of her displacement is a rust on the razor that threatens the throat. It is an unnecessary insult. That was the end of the first introduction, I suppose. It doesn't have a number. So the next page, which for me is page 7, begins chapter 1. When I was 3 and Bailey 4, we had arrived in the musty little town, wearing tags on our wrists which instructed, to whom it may concern, that we were Marguerite and Bailey Johnston Jr. from Long Beach, California, en route to Stamps, Arkansas, care of Mrs. Annie Henderson. Our parents had decided to put an end to their calamitous marriage, and Father shipped us home to his mother. A porter had been charged with our welfare. He got off the train the next day in Arizona, and our tickets were pinned to my brother's inside coat pocket. I don't remember much of the trip, but after we reached the segregated southern part of the journey, things must have looked up. Negro passengers who always traveled with loaded lunchboxes felt sorry for the poor little motherless darlings and plied us with cold fried chicken and potato salad, 2 of my favorites. Years later, I discovered that the United States had been crossed thousands of times by frightened black children traveling alone to their newly affluent parents in northern cities, or back to grandmothers in southern towns when the urban north reneged on its economic promises. The town reacted to us as its inhabitants had reacted to all things new before our coming. It regarded us a while without curiosity, but with caution. And after we were seen to be harmless, and the children, it closed in around us as a real mother embraces a stranger's child, warmly, but not too familiarly. We lived with our grandmother and uncle in the rear of the store. It was always spoken of with a capital S, which she had owned some 25 years. Early in the century, Mama, we soon stopped calling her grandmother, sold lunches to the sawmen in the lumberyard, East Stamps, and the seedmen at the cotton gin, West Stamps. Her crisp meat pies and cool lemonade, when joined to her miraculous ability to be in 2 places at the same time, assured her business success. From being a mobile lunch counter, she set up a stand between the 2 points of fiscal interest and supplied the workers' needs for a few years. Then she had the store built in the heart of the Negro area. Over the years, it became the lay center of activities in town. On Saturdays, barbers sat their customers in the shade on the porch of the store, and troubadours on their ceaseless crawlings through the South leaned across its benches and sang their sad songs of the Brazos while they played juice harps and cigar box guitars. The formal name of the store was the WM, I'm not sure what WM means, WM Johnson General Merchandise Store. Customers could find food staples, a good variety of colored thread, mash for hogs, corn for chickens, coal oil for lamps, light bulbs for the wealthy, shoestrings, hairdressing, balloons, and flower seeds. Anything not visible had only to be ordered. Until we became familiar enough to belong to the store and it to us, We were locked up in a fun house of things where the attendant had gone home for life. Each year, I watched the field across the stone turn caterpillar green, then gradually frosty white. I knew exactly how long it would be before the big wagons would pull into the front yard and load on the cotton pickers at daybreak to carry them to the remains of slavery's plantations. During the picking season, my grandmother would get out of bed at 4 o'clock. She never used an alarm clock. And creep down to her knees and chant in a sleep-filled voice, "Our Father, thank you for letting me see this new day. Thank you that you didn't allow the bed I lay on last night to be my cooling board, nor my blanket my winding sheet. Guide my feet this day along the straight and narrow, and help me to put a bridle on my tongue. Bless this house and everybody in it. Thank you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen." Before she had quite arisen, she called our names and issued orders, and pushed her large feet into homemade slippers and across the bare, lye-washed wooden floor to light the cold oil lamp. The lamplight in the store gave a soft, make-believe feeling to our world, which made me want to whisper and walk about on tiptoe. The odors of onions and oranges and kerosene had been mixing all night and wouldn't be disturbed until the wooden slat was removed from the door and the early morning air forced its way in with the bodies of people who had walked miles to reach the pickup place. "Sister, I'll have 2 cans of sardines." "I'm gonna work so fast today, I'm gonna make you look like you standing still." "Let me have a hunk of cheese and some sody crackers." "Just give me a couple of them fat peanut patties." That would be from a picker who was taking his lunch. The greasy brown paper sack was stuck behind the bib of his overalls. He'd use the candy as a snack before the noon sun called the workers to rest. In those tender mornings, the store was full of laughing, joking, boasting, and bragging. One man was going to pick 200 pounds of cotton, and another 300. Even the children were promising to bring home 4 bits and 6 bits. The champion picker of the day before was the hero of the dawn. If he promised that the cotton in today's field was going to be sparse and stick to the bowls like glue, every listener would grunt a hearty agreement. The sound of the empty cotton sacks dragging over the floor and the murmurs of waking people were sliced by the cash register as we rang up the 5-cent sales. If the morning sounds and smells were touched with the supernatural, the late afternoon had all the features of the normal Arkansas life. In the dying sunlight, the people dragged rather than their empty cotton sacks. Brought back to the store, the pickers would step out of the backs of trucks and fall down, dirt disappointed, to the ground. No matter how much they had picked, it wasn't enough. Their wages wouldn't even get them out of debt to my grandmother, not to mention the staggering bill that waited on them at the white commissary downtown. The sounds of the new morning had been replaced with grumbles about cheating houses, weighted scales, snakes, skimpy cotton, and dusty roads. In later years, I was to confront the stereotyped picture of gay, song-singing cotton pickers with such inordinate rage that I was told, even by fellow blacks, that my paranoia was embarrassing. But I had seen the fingers cut by the mean little cotton bolls, and I had witnessed the backs and shoulders and arms and legs resisting any further demands. Some of the workers would leave their sacks at the store to be picked up the following morning, but a few had to take them home for repairs. I winced to picture them sewing the coarse material under a coal oil lamp, with fingers stiffening from the day's work. In too few hours, they would have to walk back to Sister Henderson's store, get victuals, and load again onto the trucks. Then they would face another day of trying to earn enough for the whole year with the heavy knowledge that they were going to end the season as they started it, without the money or credit necessary to sustain a family for 3 months. In cotton picking time, the late afternoons revealed the harshness of black southern life, which in the early morning had been softened by nature's blessing of grogginess, forgetfulness, and the soft lamplight. That is chapter 1. And I am going to take a little pause so that I can upload this, and I'll be back for chapter 2.